The Three-Legged Cat by Margaret Mahy.
There was once an old and tabby cat called Tom, who longed to prowl the world. He longed to see the hills and valleys and wild, mysterious woods as well. He longed to see the sea.
But Tom was a three-legged cat. Prowling was difficult with only 3 legs. What he was good at was curling up neatly, wrapping his tabby tail around himself and going to sleep. As he slept, though, he dreamed of the wide world, and his 3 paws twitched.
Tom lived with short-sighted Mrs. Grimble of number 7 Cardamom Street. She was a most respectable widow. She liked cats, but she liked them best when they curled up and slept. It bothered her to see Tom come running all dot and go carry one whenever she opened the fridge.
"You'll eat me out of the house and home," she said. She wanted a cat who would stay put and eat nothing. She certainly didn't want a prowler.
"One prowler in this family is quite enough," said Mrs. Grimble, for she had a rascally, roving, semi-swagman brother called Cyril.
All year he prowled uphill and down and around and out edges of the world, wearing his revolting, molting Russian hat to keep his bald head warm. Once a year he would look in at number 7 Cardamom Street for a cup of tea and a bit of chinwag. Oh dear, Mrs. Gimble knew the neighbours would be watching, and as that revolting, molting Russian hat came up the street and turned in at her gate. "Yes," she grumbled to Tom, "1 prowler is more than enough."
Tom wrapped himself around his own tabby tail. He dreamed of prowling beside the sea. In his dream, the sea was pink and fuzzy. He dreamed of forests and fields of sheep. In his dream, the forests were no higher than hedges, and the sheep ran around like woolly hedgehogs.
"Thank goodness Tom isn't one of those prowling cats," thought Miss Grimble. "I'm glad he's only 3 legs." Familiar step on the path. Horrid compulsion. A molting, revolting Russian hat was coming up the path to her door. It was Cyril the swagman. What would the neighbours say? Knock, knock went the door. "Hello, Daisy. How about a cup of tea and a bit of a chinwag?" cried Cyril. Cyril, it's lovely to see you, but why don't you curl up and settle down?" Mrs. Grimble said, as she poured a cup of tea for her brother. She wept into the teapot.
"Kind to my tea, Daisy. I take sugar, not salt," said Cyril. "But perhaps you're right. I love prowling the world, but my hat is badly molted back. Somehow it doesn't keep my head warm as it used to. It's not much fun prowling around with a bald head when it's cold. Perhaps I should settle down once more around the world and then I'll think about it."
As they see there's a swagman sitting in here having a cup of tea and a bit of a chinwag, she thought.
As Cyril poured tea into his saucer so that it would cool quickly, Mrs. Grimble told him all about a new furniture polish she had discovered in a sale.
And Cyril told her how to prowl successfully during earthquakes, But Mrs. Gimble hated the idea of earthquakes, and Cyril, who had no furniture, was not the least bit interested in furniture polish.
Time to be on my way, Cyril said. At last he picked up his hat, but it wasn't his hat. He put on his hat, but it wasn't his hat. Out into the street he strolled, wearing Tom, the three-legged cat, curled around his bald head, sound asleep.
Bye, old girl, he called to Mrs. Grimble. I'll be back next year for a cup of tea and a bit of a chinwag. Went Cyril the swagman, and with him went Tom the three-legged cat.
My hat is deliciously warm, Cyril thought as he marched down the road. My bald head felt so cozy I could prowl all the way around the world wearing a hat as warm as this.
Then Tom the cat saw the sea for the first time. It was not pink, it was green. It was not fizzy, it rolled back and forth all the way around the world. The sea was the sea, thought Tom the cat. I'm seeing the sea, he began to purr. My hat is purring, thought Cyril the swagman. It's never purred before.
A tabby tail twitched in front of my eyes. Horror-Kopotchkin, I've carried off Daisy's three-legged cat, cried Cyril the swagman. It's just as well I have enough sausages for the two of us.
Meanwhile, back at number 7 Cardamom Street, Mrs. Grimble was sitting by the fire, stroking the hat. It sat still, and when she opened the fridge, the hat did not stir. It just sat there, molting slightly. My cat is suddenly cheap to feed, thought Mrs. Grimble. The hat did not show the least bit of interest, even when she ate her own fish dinner.
In the wide world, Cyril and Tom were sharing the sausages. I won't settle down after all, said Cyril the swagman, stroking Tom. You can curl around my bald head and keep it cosy while I do the prowling for both of us. I've never had a better hat than a furry, friendly, three-legged cat.
And I've never had a better cat, said Mrs. Grimble, stroking the rotten hat tenderly. It's true that it molts, but we all have our faults, and it's cheap to keep and always asleep. The wide world beckoned, Tom purred. The hat just sat on Mrs. Gimble's lap, and everyone lived happily ever after.